now. November 5th is Election Day. The polls in New London will be open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. at New London High School, at Harbor School, and at Nathan Hale School, and Election Day registration at City Hall. And we at Thinking Green are continuing our series of talking to candidates about themselves and about the issues. So this week, my guest is Sharmaine Gregor, also known as Sharms, who is running for the Board of Education on the Green Party line. And we're going to talk to Sharms about, well, you know, her background and why she's running and what she stands for. So welcome, Sharms.
Hi, thank you. Hey, everybody.
And this is a live show. People don't usually call in, but they could if they want. I thought I'd start and ask you, like, what some of your background was. You have been around in New London for, you know, several years now, but I think a lot of people don't really know where you started here and what kind of things you were doing.
Well, I will reiterate what I said at the last debate and say that I am a product of New London in the essence that I was born at L&M Hospital. And I did formatively start my years in New London. I had the privilege of going to East Lyme schools, which I believe kind of gave me some leg, I guess you would say. They are a blue ribbon school, and they definitely have that solid B rating. And I love my educational experience there. Unfortunately, I did not have the privilege of going to New London High School and getting to be a part of that community. So when I came back after my stint in upstate New York doing AmeriCorps, I found myself here and not back in East Lyme, which is kind of really cool. And in that kind of finding myself back here, I wasn't really sure about like what I was doing and kind of where I was going, having done a lot of community service and a lot of youth development and a lot of outreach for youth empowerment. And I stumbled upon Fresh New London one day when I was walking with a friend, and you know, we spent a significant amount of time there ogling at all of the goodies. And
they've built quite the establishment there.
Oh, yeah, and even more so.
We're switching mics.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why. I hope people sort of heard what you said before, but we'll try to get it right.
Hopefully it'll be all right.
Yeah. Yeah, so after AmeriCorps, and you came back to New London.
Yeah, so like I said, I found myself wandering the streets of New London, as so many people do. It's a beautiful city to just walk around, and for those of you that feel unsafe in the city to do so, I implore you to take a step out of your comfort zone and do so, because there is a lot of beauty to be seen. Including the gardens, which I ogled at for a number of hours with my friend, and then we had this purpose of saying, hey, well, maybe there is something going on here, and maybe there are people. So after they left, I made a point to come back quite frequently. I would think, like regular gardener style, like actually 2 or 3 times a week, basically. And I was just trying to find people. And then one day I found people, and it was Saturday morning that I was over there, and the Fresh crew was outside, and we had some really awesome young people. Am I allowed to name those young people?
I don't think you have to. But
okay, but they're awesome.
Some of them have actually been on the show.
Okay, right, exactly. I was just saying, yes. They're pretty, really forward-thinking people and really go-getters and know where they stand, and it was really, really awesome to see and hear. And that's when I was kind of like still figuring things out, and I went away again for a stint of time, and I got an email from Arthur, and he said, hey, we're looking for somebody to come help. And I was like, oh yeah, sure, I'll totally do this. And we called it my farm turnship, and that was like my first like step into like being fresh and staying woke. And it was really awesome. We did so many things that I wouldn't necessarily say are typical experiences for kids, especially in an urban environment. And probably not so great for some people would be like, you did what was woo? And I'm like, no, but no, this is like really, if you want to live homestead, like you have to know how to grow your own food and how to like really garner those skills. And I'm referring to the chickening, and I'm not going to go any farther than that because I think it's awesome. And yeah, I can't wait to do it again. It hasn't been brought back in a while, but yeah, it's going to be awesome when we bring it full frontal. And yeah, and so from there, I spent a lot of time in the garden, and I realized I did not have nearly the background that I needed scientifically to do the things that I wanted to do. And that's when I enrolled at Mitchell College with help from the Step Up. Katie Hallisey was my advocate, and she got me into Mitchell, and she's supported me from day one until right now. She always texts me to make sure that I'm doing great and everything is all right. And I'm technically not in the program anymore, which is, you know, that whole community base. Which is really awesome. And so, yeah, I graduated from Mitchell with my BFA in environmental science, and that was a whirlwind of opportunity and experience that I'm really, really grateful for having. It wasn't my first attempt at college, and I doubt it's going to be my last. There are definitely still more things I'd like to learn, and learning is an everlasting thing. You can, every day is a chance to learn something new, to pick up a book, to listen to somebody's story. So yeah, I've come around there, and as part of being part of the Mitchell community and the Fresh community, I met a lot of really awesome people that brought me into a circle around community development and community awareness and community advocacy. And we have several groups that we work with, including Hearing Youth Voices and the Writer's Block, that empower young people to do what they think is right and give them the voice to do those things, whether it be on the stage or in politics or on the farm. And yeah, I came around to the Green Party several years later because, you know, it just seemed right and it fit with kind of my own moral values. And I was asked to be a candidate for the Board of Ed, and I immediately thought, hey, this is something that you should do. This is an opportunity that you can step up and rise to the occasion. You may not be or feel fully prepared for it, but that's why we have the supports that we have, and we have the opportunity to talk to all those that are in power now and that could be in power, and to bounce those ideas off of one another. And it's been a really gratifying experience to be a part of this candidacy, because it gives me a real connection to the community and where I stand.
And I think, from my point of view, as like the oldest of this year's Green Party candidates, that, you know, the connection that you have with people who are young, who are, you know, you've been out of high school for a while, but not so long that you've forgotten the experience. And I think it's really important to have that younger perspective as part of the mix on the Board of Ed, because, you know, many of us, you know, went to school when things were very different. You know, I grew up in Philadelphia, and yet my elementary and junior high schools were very segregated, like not by law segregated, but just because our neighborhoods in Philadelphia were very segregated. And it wasn't until high school that, you know, I actually met people from other neighborhoods in Philadelphia. So New London, you know, is a smaller town, but, you know, there's a lot more diversity that you bump into every day, which is really one of the great things about it here.
Yeah, yeah. And it always astonishes me the level of diversity that we really do have here, because we have everybody. I'm gonna quote Kelly Pickler and her song "All Kinds of Kinds," and we have all kinds of kinds in New London. And the only bridge that we have to get over is accepting that you can't judge somebody from where they came from or where they're going. You just have to take them for where they're at and put positive vibes and positive auras around what you're doing and what they're doing, and hopefully that is a building and a foundation for a better community, and that we're not debilitated by somebody's lack of experience or lack of ability to do something in which you feel they should be able to do because you don't know where they come from. And so just because you can doesn't mean that they can, and I'm pretty sure there's things that they can do that you can't do. And so that's why it's really important to just take a step back and know where you're coming from in order to understand more so where they're coming from.
And I think, where I've got to know you more was more recently that you've become very involved in the Southeastern Connecticut Community Land Trust.
Yeah.
To the point that you're a vice president of the board.
Yeah.
So how did that come about? And maybe talk a little bit about what the idea behind the land trust is.
So the Land Trust has a very extensive history, and I'm going to start back with new communities. I recently had the experience of visiting new communities, which is in Resora, of, I'm losing the whole Cypress Pond, that's what it is. Resora at Cypress Pond, which is located in Albany, or Albany, as I was corrected many times.
Really?
Georgia, yes, it is not Albany, it's Albany, Georgia, for those local folks. I appreciate the articulation. And yeah, it was beautiful. Like, it is south. It is southern. It was the first time I saw some real cotton fields. I feel kind of like weird saying that, but I had to go take pictures and whatnot. But yeah, they are a community land trust, and they celebrated their 50th anniversary this year. And I fortunately got to be a part of that. And the original founders, Shirley and Charles Gerard, I got to meet both of them, and I have pictures with Shirley and with her. I met her son, and I got to talk to him a little bit, and also with Mr. Pickett, who is the president of the Grounded Solutions, which is, he's been back and forth with both of those. But basically, they're the beginning of what a land trust is, and that's just holding land in perpetuity for a extended period of time beyond lifetimes of which we can really think about, because it's not just my lifetime, but my children's children's children. And understanding the value of that land and really coming back to like the original founders of, like, you work the land, you tend the land, but you don't abuse it. And so it was just really cool to hear and to see a lot of the things that they were talking about. But the Southeastern Connecticut Land Trust is, like it says, in Southeastern Connecticut, and we have two persuasive chapters at the moment. One is the Voluntown Peace Trust, and one is the New London Chapter Peace Trust. And we are doing our best to make housing affordable and equitable, and to get people that want to really be in our communities to stay in our communities and feel like that they have a role, and that they're not just renters of absentee landlords, and when they call for help that they don't necessarily receive it because they aren't the owners of their land or the stewards of their land. And so we're trying to give people that opportunity to hold some ground in our community. And we are in the process. We have acquired a piece of land on Ledgard Street, which is held under trust right now, and we put up a pop-up garden. Anybody is free to go there, and it says, basically, if you need it, take it. If you don't, please don't, because hopefully somebody else will need it. Take what you need, and we have a number of those popping up everywhere. It's in conjunction with Fresh New London's Edible New London, where they have beds growing up in a multitude of places and spaces. And what we really just want to do is preserve the land, not for commercial use or developmental use for more renting. We want our city to be a city of people that care and share. And in order to do that, we want to make them feel as stable as possible. And with the destruction of the Crystal Towers, we really felt it unnecessary necessity for our city to afford our citizens that opportunity.
Now, whereas the new communities, I think that was formed mostly for agricultural land because
So
in the beginning, right?
So
Yeah.
okay. So well, I guess
New
we can
London's
take,
a little different.
New
but
London
you can
isn't
talk,
okay. So
we have
yeah,
enough
so no,
time.
it
Talk
wasn't.
about.
So originally, New Communities bought, it was 6,000 acres of
Wow.
land, and they intended to build 3 agro communities in there, and so the communities would be sufficient and sustainable for the people that worked and claimed the land. And so the land was owned by the trusts, which were the members of the community in which that they lived in that space. Unfortunately, due to historical inequalities, some things happened and they lost that land. And when they lost that land, it was some time before that they could reclaim their standing. And when they reclaimed their standing, they didn't follow in the same suit because they didn't have the same land available to them. So right now, Resora at Cypress Pond is about 1,600 acres, and they are using it mostly for farming because farming is, in the end, what kept them going. Farming, in the end, was something that provided for the community and still provides for most communities. We can't live without our farmers. We wouldn't have food on our tables without our farmers. We no longer appreciate the value of getting something locally because we go to the grocery store where the shelves are stocked regularly. And so they kind of bring that home with like knowing where your food comes from and knowing your farmer. And they don't grow everything under the sun. They are mostly a pecan farm. As we're up here, we're a backyard farm. So it's like, what can we grow in our area that you can just take into your kitchen? So like tomatoes and peppers and herbs and spices and things that are zone efficient because we definitely don't have the weather that they have.
Yeah, we're not doing pecans.
Yeah, we're definitely not doing pecans. But exactly, it's like knowing your land and knowing what's actually sustainable there, and they have definitely done that, and they have reached out and they've been able to help other people, and that's kind of where we're at with our land trust and with Fresh, that where we can take those steps and make things more accessible to more people in our community, and the land trust is just one way of doing that with affordable housing.
And it's interesting to me that in both cases, part of the function of the land trust is to regain some equity where in the past, it wasn't equitable. We've had Michelle Bicking on the show in the past, and one of her passions is getting women of color into farming. And, if you look historically, people of color have done a lot of farming, but they haven't had the chance to own their own land very much. So the land trust is allowing that to happen. But then we come to New London and we look at like old restrictive housing deeds, and it's almost a parallel situation that, people couldn't just buy houses very readily, but now the land trust maybe will help reverse that and increase the home ownership rate.
Yeah, I hope so, and I believe it will. I am one of the people that feel very strongly. I want to own a community land trust home, not just for me, but for, like I said, for future generations of my family. It's empowering, for one, and it's like taking back something that most people feel kind of like sharecroppy about. If you know what I mean by sharecroppy. Because that's kind of like the history in which we're raised. Like, God forbid you go and farm and be a Black person because, like you're going back into like historical tendencies and you shouldn't have
so
to
there
do
is
that.
kind of a stigma attached because of the history.
And we kind of have to like break that stigma of like, no, everybody has a right to the land and to use it in the most formidable way, and not just to build commercial high rises for people that can spend absorbently.
Yeah, well, and I guess now I hadn't really planned to talk about it, but on Friday there's going to be kind of a opening ceremony or open house at 34 Press Street, which is the first house that's going on the market for the Community Land Trust.
Yeah. And 34 Press Street, don't forget it. It is this Friday. It is open to the public. We have a wonderful ED. Her name is Rain, and she has kept us going in times when I personally didn't feel like we were making very big strides. And she was like, no, guys, look at this. We're doing it. And it's just really awesome to finally say that, like, our house is going up for sale on Friday. Friday is the open house. It will be on the market for as long as need be. We are trying to get applications in, and our application process is not complicated, but it is intensive because we do require you to be prepared to be a homeowner, and that is different than being a renter. And not only being a homeowner, but being a homeowner in a community that supports the prosperity of the land. So if you feel like you're home ownership ready, we implore you to come, and we encourage you to come. We have a lot of resources that we're really proud to say that we can offer to those that are ready, and those that are not ready. We implore you to come and just ask the questions, because some of the questions that you have, we may not have been asked yet. And there continues to be questions that I ask myself on a regular basis that like would make it easier for someone to be in that position to own a home. But we have the homestead offices have been a really great asset to us, and they will be there to help you go through some of the preliminary steps in preparing for this. And we're going to put some trees in the ground that aren't going to die over the winter. So that's pretty awesome, because how many of you know how to do that? Thanks, Bob. It's going to be a really great experience for the community, and I really invite anybody that is open to come. And also, if you are a great volunteer and you want to help us with our next house, we're in that market as well.
So let's talk a little bit, move on a little bit to like more school board issues. Okay. I do believe that everything is really connected, and that some of the lack of stability within the school system might harken back to the fact that the home ownership rate in New London is the lowest in the state, and so there's a lot of transients. And one thing does impact the other, but there are some specific issues to deal with the Board of Education and the experiences that our kids have in school that I wanted to talk about. And there was a debate like last week that the Neighborhood Alliance sponsored, and a whole lot of the conversation was about some of the recent bad revelations of things that had happened in New London schools that harmed students and were not caught immediately. And I guess I wanted to hear your take on both, like what our schools should do, as short-term response, and also what we can do in the long run to make sure that this isn't something that happens periodically, but it's like one and done, and things are better from now on.
Yeah. So I'm going to quote Regina from there, and she said, there was a time when you walked down the street and you may have not known the face that was waving at you, but it was an elder, and they knew your parents or your grandparents, and if you were talking out of turn or you were just being downright rude, they were going to, say something to you very politely and then go and tell your parents. And and that's the kind of community that we need to get back to. Is we need to get back to knowing our neighbors, and we need to get back to supporting ourselves again as a community. Like if you teach in New London and you don't live in New London, you don't have that sense of draw to make sure that your pupils are attended to when they leave the classroom the way they are when they're sitting in front of your face. And so I think the biggest thing is drawing the community back into schools and the school back into the community and saying that we only have 6 3/4 acres or square miles of New London, which isn't a lot. And most of our schools are walkable if you live in vicinity of your school. And so, I think that it comes down to the communication of if you're a teacher and you hear something, it's not a bad thing to go and tell somebody. It's okay to report that person if you feel like they're not doing their job properly. And I feel like we've gotten away from those kinds of things because it's the 21st century. I think things are different now, and I can't say that as in I've lived that, but just in the current atmosphere of policy and politics that I've seen and heard, I think that we should hold each other more accountable for those kinds of things. And it might seem harsh to do so, especially when you want to build that kind of safeness. But I feel like a lot of that safeness comes out of saying, like, just like we call our students out on being bullies and being aggressive towards one another, we should call each other out and saying, hey, I know you may not have meant for that to come off that way, but from, sideline ears, it didn't sound too great. So you might want to go back and clarify what's going on here, because there might be some questions down the road that you may not be ready for. And if that's the case, then you may not have a position here in New London, especially in our schools and especially where it impacts our students.
Now, I think it was a few years ago that Hearing Youth Voices and some other people from the community really pushed to get restorative practices put into the schools. And now there is an employee in the schools whose responsibility is maintaining a positive, open climate.
Yeah.
And so what do you think is the best way to proceed with that kind of thing so that it really makes a difference?
I think it's too new to say that we're not proceeding in a positive direction. The fact that we have said that this is something that needs to happen and something that is happening, and there are teachers that are taking the trainings. I think that we need to start tracking those trainings better, and we should start making it a mandate that before you even enter the school, that's something that goes under your belt, and that goes into something that it's not just the training, but like a moral standing when it comes to our students, that you're appreciating and valuing their presence there, because if it were up to some of them, they would not come. Especially when you start to get to high school students where, they start getting jobs and other things start to weigh very heavily on their minds. So you have to say that you took the time to show up, which is really important. That's half the battle. You took the time to follow through in some things that you may not have wanted to follow through in, and we can appreciate that follow through. And we have to raise the bar and say that just because you've done this and you've made it this far doesn't mean that we still don't expect you to want or to do better and to have that ambition for yourself.
Now, you mentioned before that a lot of the teachers, and this is true not just in our schools, but in our fire department and our police department, that a lot of people who work in New London don't live in New London, and that it makes our community, kind of less strong and more fragmented. That so many people who work here are going home at the end of the day. So, I don't know. Do you have any ideas for how to either bring more New Londoners into teaching here, or inspiring New London high school students to want to be teachers so they will want to work here in 5 years or 10 years?
Yeah. So I think that the biggest thing for me is I wanted to be a teacher growing up. I thought that teaching was going to be the best thing in the world and that it was going to be so rewarding. But I think a lot of it comes down to having that own inner ambition that, sometimes you're going to have to learn the things that you don't want to learn in order to get where you need to go. And you can't give up on yourself just because you're having a difficult time in a particular subject or area. And I think that's the biggest thing, is encouraging students that have a hard time in any of the core, like the core classes, math, science, social studies, language arts, that, this isn't the end of the road. You may not get it now, but in 10 years, it could click and be like, oh, okay, all right, that's all right, So just because you're struggling now doesn't mean you're always going to have this struggle. And I think it's really important for them to hear that on a regular basis, for them to hear kind of where we failed, and know that we still ended up where we wanted to be. It may not have been where we decided at 13 when everybody asked us what we were going to do with our lives, but it still gives that same value, where I wanted to be a teacher, but now I'm sitting and running for the Board of Ed. I'm not a teacher, but I'm still a willing participant in the education system, and I still want those that come after me to do better than I did. And I think that's really important.
And as you were talking, I was thinking that in New London schools, one of the challenges that students have in the here and now is that a lot of them come from homes where English is not the language spoken. And in the long term, I totally believe that being, bilingual or multilingual is a huge advantage for people. It doesn't necessarily make their school years easier.
Yeah.
So, how do we support that? It's got to go beyond just the school.
It definitely does. And once again, it comes back to what's available in the community. If your parents don't speak English and they are not necessarily required or obligated to speak English or anything other than their native language, then what has it that you feel any type of obligation to do the same? And so when you get into school and then you're put into a class where all of the kids are of your native language, then you really don't have any reason to speak any language. And I think that's why our school system has encouraged the bilingual programs.
Yeah, like both ways.
So it's kind of good to hear something that you're not used to, because it opens your mind to the possibilities. Like, there are Mandarin speakers, there are French speakers and Haitian speakers and ASL speakers, and we should be open to all of those forms of communication, because once again, we're not a one-lane street. Like, there's going to be people coming at us in all directions. And I think a lot of people at the Board of Ed learned the silent llama,
yes.
which is, I don't know if it's an official sign, but I'm pretty sure they've got to have like some kind of ASL for besides like a quiet, but yeah.
Well, I'm a retired preschool teacher, and especially working with infants and toddlers, using manual sign language with them is very popular, because it's been shown to facilitate the development of spoken language. Mm-hmm. And then it's like more and, you have to go to the bathroom and just very basic kinds of things. But it really seems like it helps people's brains grow, I guess, to be able to communicate things in more than one way.
Yeah, and it's really important to know that your words aren't the only way to communicate. Your body language says a lot. Your lack of language says a lot. So those of us that are a little more introverted and don't speak as much, that says a lot to somebody that's super outgoing. They might question why you don't say things, or why you don't ever have a comment, or why you never speak up in class, but it's not because you don't have anything to say. It's just that, somebody may have already said what you said, and you're just like, I'm going to just let them speak, because, they got it going, and I'm okay with standing behind that person, and that's okay too. And so, yeah, we just have to understand all the forms of communication and how they come and in the ways that they come in, and to be able to adjust to those kinds of things. And it's not easy if you haven't learned those skills. And I feel like the more social you are with other people, the more you garner those skills. And so the fact that we have the Drop-In Learning Center that starts basically right out the womb.
Yeah.
It affords kids the opportunity to already embark on those social skills before they even have language. And so they're not speaking, but they're playing with other kids, and they're able to face confrontation at an early age and develop those kinds of skills. And like, oh, okay, well, things aren't always going to go my way, and I do kind of have to compromise. And what does compromise mean when they say should I share my snack, or splitting my snack, or it's his turn to ride the tricycle, and all those kinds of things. So yeah, those kind of unwritten rules of society kind of fall into play. But if you're at home and you don't have those kinds of things, it's kind of hard to develop those kinds of skills.
Now, on your literature, one of the things you mentioned was talking about individualized student needs.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to me to be a big challenge. New London has relatively high class sizes. Now, I think the latest contract is 26 students in a class up to, which is probably the highest in the region. So I know you have experience working with young people with special needs.
Yeah.
So what would your ideas be for helping to provide individualized needs?
It's really hard to say that, because when you start to talk about the individual person, you start to talk about a lot of different things. And for the school to only be a part of a small chunk of that need, it's kind of like, where's the wraparound service that supports the other parts that that they may get at school, but that they don't get after school because they go home to mom and dad are the only two people that are at home. So all the things that they learned at school, they don't have a chance to reinforce in other places. So it really is about affording students the opportunity to engage and have those enrichment programs and those after-school programs and those parks and rec programs that allow them to get, once again, come back together as a community, as like a cohort of kids that are, like playground, like in the summer camp. That's what summer camp is a chance for kids in our community to come together in a less structured environment to learn and develop some of those skills that they've learned over the years. And if we don't support those kinds of things, the arts and the extracurriculars that kind of give each student their own ability to understand themselves, then we're not kind of giving them a good structure for sitting still in class and listening to a teacher talk about things that they don't necessarily understand or want to talk about.
And that's linked to one of the other things that you had said, was like creating partnerships within the communities.
Yeah.
So that we're taking a more holistic approach, even though we can't do it all ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are, and I would say more so for the high school youth, because I feel like I've been more a part of them with Fresh, and like I said, hearing youth voices in the writer's block, they do give the students a really good outlet for those kinds of communications. But even, the Drunken Palette, they've started to offer a non-drunken palette time, which I think is pretty, it's not just for adults anymore. They want, it's, they were saying it's more like an open community art space. Have your kid's birthday here. Don't feel like it's just an adult thing to do, to come and, gather and paint together and share a conversation. But things like that is really awesome. The more yoga studios are offering more kind of quote mommy and me style classes, where it's not just adults in a class together, but bring your kids, let's be a whole family experience. And I think that the more of those that we have, the better. And our community does a really good job of having events on the Parade Plaza and down at Fort Trumbull. The few things that we do have on the square. I just recently went to the Ness fishing event that they have. This is, I think, was the 3rd annual, and it was awesome. It was a lot of fun. Like, we caught 1 fish, and we were totally okay with it. But like, it was the fact that we had the opportunity to come out as a community and to do that. And so the more that we encourage those kinds of buildings, the more that we encourage that kind of self-awareness in our students and in the young people.
And and one thing that I think has rippled through all of the Green Party campaigns this year was something that Frida had brought up about like how parents can be more involved if we can provide childcare at civic meetings, at city council meetings, at Board of Ed meetings. Mike DeMoro had a column in today's paper about how people show up for football games, but they need to show up for Board of Ed meetings as well. And it is important, but if you work all day and have young children, you can't just bring them anywhere.
Right, yeah, and especially with the stigma of like, it's 9 o'clock and you and your children are out at this event.
Yes, and you have to be out waiting for the bus at 7:30.
Yeah, so like, what kind of parent are you that you're having your kids stay up this late? And you're just like, well, the kind of parent that wants them to be a part of things. And it's not a terrible reason for them to be up late if they're at a mayoral debate. They may not understand what's going on, but it's the fact that they're open to the opportunity, that the kids have the opportunity to be like, do I want to go to this? Do I not want to go to this? Am I being held hostage in my house because there isn't the affordability for me to attend? And that's kind of where, as adults, we hold that line. If we don't give them the opportunity to show up, then they're not going to. And if they don't learn early enough that this is something to be a part of, then they're going to have no reason to do so.
Now, I know that every forum I've gone to so far, people want to talk about money and the budget and the high taxes. And just today at an event at the high school for students, one of the candidates for city council, whom I won't name, stated that education takes up 65% of the city budget. And yeah. So what do you say when people make those statements?
I say that if you Google U.S. salaries and look up in order, because there's a couple of different links that they give you about the amount that each state on average, which is nothing because we all know how averages work.
Right. And Connecticut is a high-cost state to live in.
It is a high cost, exactly. And then you have to input all of those factors into it. But if you look at these, we are ranked in the top 10. And most of the sites have us listed around 5, 6, and or 4. And that says of all the states, we are getting the top dollar for our money. And I think that's important. And I think it says something, because those that are getting less than us are still sometimes doing better than we are. But it doesn't say anything when it comes to other resources that the state and the city afford our citizens. Like, if you have a fire, the fire department shows up. If you have an altercation, the police department shows up. And no one ever questions when they ask for money, because, they're like our public enforcement. But the second the education system asks for extra money for anything, it's like, hold on, we give you guys so much money. What are you doing with it? Well, half of it goes through you guys. And we don't feel like we're getting the bang for our buck that we should. And that's why we're asking. And again, in our city in particular, I'm going to jump onto another subject that we talked about multiple times, is that they cut the public works funding to our school systems, and then it expected us to pick up the slack. And if we didn't already have enough money to do that, then how are we supposed to do that as well? And it just doesn't, like, you're making, putting us in a tough spot in order to do some of the things that we want to do and afford the students some of those opportunities, because, funding is being cut in some smaller but crucial places.
So I think you told me earlier before the show that it's the education budget is actually 47%.
Yeah, it's something around that. Yeah, I'm scoping this budget, and it's a really hard thing to get through, because like the line items are kind of ridiculous in my opinion. It's like 27.2 to 1.3. And I'm like, so you're saying we have 27 students to like 1.5 teachers? And because that's the ratio in the school, we have this amount of money to allocate for each student. And it just doesn't seem like reasonable.
I remember one time I had heard like how much it costs on average to educate each student in our schools per day. But it's worth noting that the New London student body has actually grown. Most school systems in Connecticut have lost students, and New London has gained students in-district students, and not just brought in that 25% from outside.
Right, yeah, and then our budget doesn't allocate for those students. The way that it should work, in my processing of the budget so far, is that when we acquire more students, that means that the budget should increase to support those students in the different areas in which they would need for the individual tracks. And it doesn't. Like, the budget has pretty much stayed the same, yet the increases continue to happen.
I was on the school board 10 years ago, and I think there's been maybe a 2.5 or 3% rise in the city part of the budget in that 10 years, like spread over 10 years, not 3% a year, but 3%
over the decade.
Over the decade. And the budget looks bigger because the magnet students are funded through a different kind of stream, through tuitions from their sending districts plus subsidies from the state. But even the number of New London students has gone up, not a huge amount, but has gone up some, while our budgeting has remained kind of static. And I'll just throw out one other little thing that I learned recently, was that health insurance costs for the district went up over 10% last year. And what do you do when suddenly you're faced with this extra, $500,000 to pay for health insurance? Anyway, I'm told we have 5 minutes left.
Okay, I just want to touch on that.
Yeah,
is once again,
do.
we are the United States of America, and we do not universally have a health system that actually supports the people. It supports the highest bidder with the highest amount of dollars in their pocket. And I think that that's what it comes down to. We can't support our teachers. Our teachers are of the medial income, and they are responsible for the future generations. And they don't get any credit for that, regardless of how fantastic or not fantastic they are. They have taken the time and dedicated their lives to educating future generations, and they deserve the pay and the insurance and the affordability to do so. And if it's got to start somewhere. And so if not in our school systems, then where?
And since we only have a few minutes left, I did want to show people what the ballot looks like.
Yay, ballot time!
Okay, so, it's always kind of hard to find the Green Party candidates. And this year it's even a little harder because Frida Berrigan's name is not on the ballot. She is on 1E, which is over here. And people who want to vote for her will have to write her name in addition to just Frida's is enough, and fill in the bubble in that 1E box. And as you can see, my name for City Council is kitty corner above that. In line D, and Sharm's name is over Board of Ed, kind of out by its lonesome, really, on line D. And people should know that, for Board of Ed and for City Council, you can vote for 7 people. And we, Greens, purposely don't run 7. We like the idea of having diversity in party, as well as in language and ethnicity and race and everything. And so people should just look at all the names, come to all the forums, and figure out, what 7 would be the team you'd like to see.
Yeah, and I think that the word diversity comes into huge play when we talk about this, because it's not just for Board of Education, but it's for all of our city positions. We want a person to speak for you, I mean, like when you talk about like who's speaking to the things that I want and I need, it's not just about, I'm going to go back to the facade. It's not about like the outside picture of I'm dressed up, I look the part, I'm playing the part, but really who's showing the moral standing about doing their job and doing their job efficiently, and not worrying about what the newspaper is saying, but more so about what the students are saying and how the teachers are reacting to what they're doing.
And for people, since we have like 1 minute left, for people who want to learn more, the next and only perhaps leftover Board of Education debate will be on October 30th. It's being sponsored by the Day Paper and the League of Women Voters, and it's going to be held at the Science and Technology Magnet High School. And you can talk to Sharms there, before or after, in addition to watching the debate. And next week, I'm actually not quite sure. We'll still be on the candidate trail. We have to do a part 2 with Frida Berrigan, who's running for mayor. And
when is the city council?
Oh, yes, the city council debates are October 23rd and October 25th. And there's a mayoral debate tomorrow, October 16th at the library, that's sponsored by New London Landmarks. So there are a whole lot of debates. If you watch the community calendar, I think we've got them all listed. So thank you, Sharms. Good night, everyone, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, Rana. That's great.
Mama